What's up, guys? Shawnthebro here, and today we are going to be going over something I'm very excited about, which is one-way platforms. We are going to be in like a full screen mode today, so you might see some weirdness on the sides there because the widget doesn't completely scale and different things like that, but ignore those for now. I'm basically just going to be showing you, I want to make this bigger because I know we have not created our camera yet. So it's a little far away from the characters. But you can see that we have these three floating platforms. And I've changed the background to make it a little bit more visible. But it's kind of dark on this guy. But we have one on the right here. We have one right here. And then we have one right up here to my left. Now, this red line you see is part of a debug line trace that we were using. It's not something that you have to worry about right now. I'll show you later in the episode what that is. And this is strictly a debug thing. It's not going to be staying there. But what we can do, these three platforms are floating platforms. You can see we have our characters standing on them currently. But I can be underneath of one, jump up, and land on the platform. I can also jump up without knocking the other player off if I do it correctly. If I restart this, I can move my one player over, and I can jump up on this platform without knocking the other player off. This is super important, whether it seems like it or not. I know the background's a little dark, but here we go. We can both jump up and both land on the platform. This is super important because this is different from how a lot of one-way platforms work. A lot of one-way platforms have a collider that you jump up into, and the platform itself ends up having its collision disabled, which that's good. But if you have things that are standing on it, or if we spawn items and we want the items to be able to sit on it, we can't have the collision for the platform be disabled just so we can jump through it. Otherwise, things will fall through it. Like this character, for example, would have fallen through it. So that's what we're going to be covering today. We do have to cover a few things with the falling back through the platform. Right now we have no functionality to do that. We will want to be able to press a button, like down on the D-pad or something like that. Some way to crouch and then maybe combine crouch and a jump to be able to fall through the platform. However we want to set it up. We will do that in another episode because we don't even actually have crouching functionality. However, that one is much easier than jumping through the platform and getting this to work. So it should be quite simple. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is make our platform. And so if you go to wherever you want your blueprint to be, add new, blueprints, blueprint class. You can just make an actor or whatever you want, really. I made mine an actor. And then I already made mine. But you'd rename it to be one-way platform BP. Go into it. I have nothing in my event graph. You can delete the events that are there if you want, or just leave them. They're not going to do anything by default. And I've added this static mesh. So when you come in here, it'll just be this ball. Add a component. Static mesh. You can do a skeletal mesh if you want it to be an animated platform, which sometimes you will want that. And here you go. You pick static mesh. This will pop up. Make sure you pick a static mesh and an element or a material just to give it some appearance to make it a little bit more, a little bit better in terms of visibility. We could change the color to maybe something else like that. Either way, it doesn't really matter, just so that we can see it. I made my static mesh a cube and just changed the scale. See this? These are my exact values if you'd like to copy what I have. I did rotate it 90 degrees because the world itself, the way I want it to be displayed, it was pointing out toward the camera, which I want these to be long with where the characters are moving. So I rotate it 90 degrees and then I change the size. All right, perfect. And once you do that, you're pretty much good for this for now. We do have to do some things with the collision down below, but this probably won't make sense just yet. So let's get into the other stuff that we need to do first. All right. So I've gone into my SSB template character. This is my base character. I know we technically have not made a base character yet. We still have two characters that are Children of Code classes. We will most likely be making a base character BP and making a child of that. However, if you don't do that, and you don't have that right now, and you want this to work for all characters, you will need all your character BPs to contain this logic, just so you are aware. Okay. Now, the way this is going to work is we are going to jump through the platform. The platform is going to ignore us initially. We're going to perform a ray trace or a line trace, whatever you want to call it. And if it hits a specific object, we want to re-enable collision with that object. So essentially, the platform is going to ignore players. It has to exist and have collision by default, but we want it to ignore the players. That way the players are allowed to jump through it. Once that ray trace becomes true, like yes, it is colliding with this platform, then we want to enable collision with the player. So let's go into the event graph and see exactly how we want to handle that. I've made a new function, and I've just called it determine can land on platform. It's a bit of a loaded function name. You can call yours whatever you want if you can come up with a better one. But essentially, this is just saying, check to see if we can land on this platform or if we are still phasing through the platform. All right, so add function, call it whatever you want. And then in the event graph of your character on event tick, which you can find by right-click, event tick. And then just drag your function on, determine can land on platform, and you'll get this. All right, so in determine can land on platform, we're basically going to be doing that stuff I mentioned earlier, where we're trying to determine if we can step up on a platform. So our local variables in this are offset and distance. We'll need them later. You don't have to set values for them now. Just make sure you make 2 local variables. You can technically make regular variables, but we're only going to use them in this function for this specific line trace that we do. So might be worth it just to make them local variables. Just make them both floats. I called them offset and distance, and I've given them values of 25 and 100. Again, those values we can determine later, and they'll probably be different for you, but we will talk about that in a second. So we have logic here to determine if the character is falling before we perform any logic. So if the character is not falling, then we're standing on a surface. If we're standing on a surface, we don't want to waste time and energy spawning a line trace and trying to check against a certain object to see if we can stand on it. We're already on the ground, so it doesn't really make much sense. In other series that I've done, like the fighting game tutorial series, you see I have a variable called isInAir. We don't have one here yet, so feel free to incorporate your own and add this instead. However, the character movement is falling is fine, and we can grab it directly from the character BP. isInAir that I use in the other series are particularly useful because I'm grabbing them in things like the animation blueprint and things like that. If you'd like to check out the rest of the episodes in the series before we get started with the actual logic, then here's the playlist to the entire Super Smash Brothers tutorial. And I will also leave the fighting game tutorial here just in case you're interested. So we have our character movement. You can drag this into the graph right here. Drag off of it and type is falling. And it will basically just determine if you're in the air or not. It's pretty reliable. Then we can drag off of that and trigger a branch. And only if this is true, only if we're falling, do we want to do the rest of this logic, as I said. So I'm going to do this underneath so you can see the nodes and how I get there. But this is pretty standard ray trace, line trace stuff at this point. A lot of you may not have seen that before if you've been watching my tutorials, because I've not really done a lot of this. But it's super useful. We just haven't gotten to a lot of places where we needed it yet. So to start, we're going to get the location of our mesh. This is because the thing we want to check against, if it can go above the platform or not, is our mesh. It's basically, is our character in a spot where we can land on this platform? Now we're going to need to modify the location of the mesh, because what we're doing is we're determining the points, you can see it here, the start and the end point of the line trace. And so imagine our character. The get rolled location goes to the center of our character. The center of our character probably isn't where we want to perform the ray trace, because if we perform it here, then whenever we get to that spot on the character, it will say, oh, yep, I can see the platforms here, and it will try to enable collision. So for example, if I split this up and we drag off of this, we do need these start and endpoints to be vectors. So I just drag X and Y in there because we don't really care the X and Y about any sort of offset. We just want it to line up with where the character is. But the Z is the height, and we do care about that. We want to move this value down so it's closer to the foot. So really only if the character's foot jumps up above the platform do we have access to land on it. And so I do float minus float and pass it in, make this new vector. Here's where I use my local variable of offset. And okay, so right now I have a value of 25. Let me show you what happens if I have a value of 0. So say we play our game and we have a value of 0 on our offset. Whoops, loaded the wrong map, silly me. Then you'll know that, okay, basically the ray trace is going to happen from the character's chest or right around there. If that's the case, then when I hit this, basically the center of my character into the object, it's going to enable collision as opposed to waiting until my feet are past it. Because of this, it turns collision on, and you can see it kind of throws me out of the box. Quite literally gives me some force and says, get out of here, because the two objects are colliding, the character and the platform. Okay, so it's a little bit smoother if you start at the foot, and it also just works better functionality-wise because you know the character is actually past where they need to be. All right, now the next thing we need to do is this is going to be the start point of line trace. I'm not trying to hide it for you. I'm just trying to make sure you can see it. Let me move this down so you don't get confused. This is going to be the starting point of the line trace. This is basically the bottom of our character's foot. Now, how you pick the offset, I don't have a great method. For me, I did trial and error. And now we need to determine the endpoint. In this case, we don't need to change the value at all for X and Y again, because all we care about is the distance of our ray trace. How far does our ray trace go, and can we land on that spot? It needs to have some distance, because if you don't give it any, it's going to be directly on your foot, and it's going to have about one specific frame where you can pick up on that and say, yes, we can land on it. So instead, we just draw a line for a specific distance, and if there's a platform there, we enable the collision. So I do a break here as opposed to splitting it because we do need this in vector form to perform a line trace. But however you want to set this up is perfectly fine as long as it works. So let's make another vector, and this is going to be our end vector. Again, pass your X and Y. And now we are going to make our distance. We float minus float. And we pass in distance. This is our other local variable right here. And there we go. And now this is the endpoint. So distance, we had 25 was the offset. Then distance is 100, so 75 units down is how far the endpoint is going to be. So the start and the end are going to be 75 different on the Z. The X and Y will be the same. So you pass these in to line trace for objects. There's a bunch of line traces when you type this in. We want line trace for objects. You can do by channel and by profile as well. However, for objects is the best for this, in my opinion, because we can set an object type, and we can quite literally just use that object type to determine if this is one that we want to be checking for, like a one-way platform, for example. Then drag in your start and end points. We do need an array of object types here, but we don't actually have our object type yet. And the way we make this is pretty interesting. If we go to Edit, Project Settings, you can be anywhere. Just go to Search Details and type in Channel. And scroll down to Engine Collision, or just go to Engine Collision here, whatever you prefer. And then these might be closed. Just open them up if they are. We specifically need the object channels one. You can have up to 18 custom channels, so this won't be an issue. And we will be adding more throughout the series because there are uses for them. Basically, we can create a new object channel right here. You won't have any. Create a new one. It will ask you to put in a name. I put in one-way platform, and the default response, I put block. Once you fill that in, it will let you accept, and make sure you hit accept. I'm going to cancel because I already have it, but I have this one that's called one-way platform now. So now, in my one-way platform, I can go back into this, and I can click on the static mesh, and I can go down in the details panel. You start up here. We can go down to collision. Collision presets. It should be block all by default or overlap all by default, depending on some of the things that you clicked earlier. You can choose custom in the collision presets list. So it'll be like block all. When you pick custom, you can see that this stuff is grayed out. When you pick custom, it all becomes available for edit. We want to make sure we edit the right things. So we don't want to block visibility or camera of the trace responses, but for all the object responses, we do want to block. This will allow us to determine if we should step up on this platform. Then for the object type, you have different things you can choose. I pick one-way platform because that's our new object type. Okay, so simple enough. And then now we have that object type, so we need to pass in an array of object types. This is basically the array of all the objects that we want to trace for, or we want to look for with this ray trace or this line trace. The easiest way to handle this is to just make an array and pass in the types that you want. In this case, we only want one-way platform, so I just make an array with one item and pass that in. I ignored the rest of this stuff. I did change the draw time to 1 second so it doesn't linger forever. That's how long that line on the screen stays. It'll be red if it's just tracing, green if it collides with the object we're looking for, and then you can set some of these other things if you want. Again, you don't have to do all that right now. And for draw debug type, I picked for duration, just because I want it to go for the draw time that I had. It can sometimes be none or persistent by default. Persistent means it'll stay forever. For 1 frame is how it sounds. Duration is for the draw time. We want for duration. Okay, and I'm going to delete all this so it doesn't get confusing. We're on the final stretch here. Now, after the line trace for objects, we just basically, it has a return value determining if that trace hit the object that we're looking for. So you can drag off of that and type branch. And then off of this branch, if it's true, it hit the object, we want to do this. If it's false, it did not hit the object, we want to do this. So we want to grab the capsule component of our character. Set collision response to channel. Whoops, not get. Set collision response to channel. There we go. We want to set the channel to be whatever one we're looking for both of them. So one-way platform, not destructible, one-way platform, and the response is going to be block. Remember, this is if the line trace did hit the platform. So if it did, we want to block. We want the player to get stuck on that platform. We don't want them to be able to fall directly through it. However, if it's false, you can copy and paste down below. If it's false, we did not hit, then we want to overlap. We should not be able to collide with the platform. This means we're either underneath of it or to the side of it. All right, so there you go. Now, once you have that, that should be working. But we have to add these to our level to actually be able to test it. So we go to our training room. It's very simple. You just find the actor that you want. Drag it into the scene and place it. Make sure it's on the same value. So for example, the depth value of this platform is 1206, which means our characters are around the 1206 point. So I'll move it here. Whoops. And there we go. Now we have a platform there. Save it, go back to your main menu, or if you have something set up to launch right in the level, that's fine too. And it should be good to go. You should be able to just jump into this platform and stay on top of it if we can jump to a height high enough. So with that, we actually can't reach it from that value. But you see if a character from above jumps into it, then we can. So what this means, even though it looks like I'm going through the platform, it's not high enough for our offset to actually put us up there. So you might need to do some adjustments with these and move it down. Probably that much is enough. Make sure if you are having any issues and you know that you're jumping high enough, that you click on the static mesh in the level and that its collision presets are correct. They should be, but if you added any previously, or if you're performing this on some actor that's already in the scene, then you'll have to make sure that you update them. But either way, there you go, guys. So that's how you can do one-way platforms that don't actually kick other people off of them, other people or objects off of them. And you can use them to stand on and jump up on like that. There we go. So I hope this helped you make some one-way platforms, and if it did, please subscribe. It does more for the channel and the series than anything else you can do. I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members and my YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I can't wait to see all the fun things that we continue to work on in the series. I'm very excited about this, and this in particular is one that I really enjoyed. Lastly, guys, if you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community where you can get free support. Alright guys, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.